Hey everyone, this is the first section of State Capitalism and World Revolution by C.L.R. James, written in collaboration with Raya Dunayevskaya and Grace Lee Boggs. The section is titled, What is Stalinism? The first section of the section is titled Trotsky's Analysis. The basic, the indispensable task of a revolutionary international is to define correctly the working class organization it proposes to overthrow. In this task, the failure of orthodox Trotskyism is complete. The transitional program asserts, quote, the definite passing over of the Comintern to the side of the bourgeois order, end quote. Later, the same document says, quote, the Third International is taken to the road of reformism, ... The Comintern's policy, ... demonstrates that the Comintern is likewise incapable of learning anything further or of changing, end quote. In the December 1938 issue of the New International, we read why, quote, 10 years ago it was predicted that the theory of socialism in one country must inevitably lead to the growth of nationalist tendencies in sections of the Comintern. This prediction has become an obvious fact, ... Today we can predict with assurance the inception of a new stage, the growth of imperialist antagonisms, the obvious proximity of the war danger, and the equally obvious isolation of the USSR must unavoidably strengthen the centrifugal nationalist tendencies within the Comintern. Each one of its sections will begin to evolve a patriotic policy on its own account. Stalin has reconciled the communist parties of imperialist democracies with their national bourgeoisies, end quote. Emphasis in original. The emphasis was on the phrase centrifugal nationalist tendencies. In the last pages of the draft program of the Comintern can be seen the prediction that Stalin's theory of socialism in one country would lead the Comintern to disintegration into national sections like the social democracy on August 4th, 1914. This is the theory from 1929 to 1938, absolutely clear and absolutely wrong. It is precisely this question, this and no other, which since the end of World War II has crippled the French party. To this day, the International does not know whether the Chinese Stalinists are enemies of the Chinese bourgeoisie or collaborators with the Chinese bourgeoisie. At the World Congress in 1948, those in Europe who held our views moved that the quoted sections be deleted from the transitional program. The motion was voted down. Trotsky, basing himself on the experience of 1914 to 1918, believed that there were two fundamental political currents in the world working class movement. One was reformism, the Second International, based upon private property, defense of the national state, enemy of the proletarian revolution. The other was revolutionary, based on or fighting for state property, repudiating the national state, advocate and defender of the proletarian revolution. Between them were various brands of centrism. Upon these premises, he saw the bureaucracy in Russia as centrist, and inevitably headed, as all bureaucracies, for the restoration of private property. That is why the transitional program says, quote, the fascist counter-revolutionary elements growing uninterruptedly express with ever greater consistency the interest of world imperialism. These candidates for the role of compradors consider, not without reason, that the new ruling layer can ensure their positions of privilege only through rejection of nationalization, collectivization, and monopoly of foreign trade in the name of the assimilation of, quote, Western civilization, end quote, i.e. capitalism. Between these two poles, there are intermediate, diffused Menshevik SR liberal tendencies which gravitate toward bourgeois democracy, end quote. And a little later, quote, from them, i.e. from the right, we can expect ever more determined attempts in the next period to revise the socialist character of the USSR and bring it closer in pattern to, quote, Western civilization, end quote, in its fascist form, end quote. misread that, I think. I think I might have said revive when I said, instead of saying revise. Quote, from them, i.e. from the right, we can expect ever more determined attempts in the next period to revise the socialist character of the USSR, and bring the USSR closer in pattern to, quote, Western civilization, end quote, in Western civilization's fascist form, end quote. And again at the World Congress, it was moved to delete this from the program. This was voted down. 2 years after the World Congress, Pablo has come to a decision. When Pablo says that we have to make up our minds to deal with degenerated worker states for centuries, Pablo is saying that the bureaucracies in Eastern Europe are organically attached to the state property forms, that the bureaucracies in Eastern Europe perform a function in production, and this is a form of economy superior to capitalism. The same applies to the Russian bureaucracy, parent and sponsor of the satellite bureaucracies. This, we have to admit, is Trotskyism, logical and complete. Pablo leaves out only the one thing that Trotsky did not leave out, namely, that if this were so, then Marxism is utopia. New section. The analysis of, quote, Johnson Forest, end quote. Which, if you didn't know, was the milieu around Dunayevskaya, James, and Boggs. Johnson is James, and Forest is Dunayevskaya. I think it's J.R. Johnson is James's name, and Freddie Forest is definitely Dunayevskaya's name. Johnson Forest repudiate all this, theory, practice, and methodology. Johnson Forest base our analysis on the theory of state capitalism. It is commonly believed that this has mainly to do with defeatism or defensism of Russia. This is the least of our concerns. This is the position of Johnson Forest. A. As the Social Democrats were the labor bureaucracy of monopoly capitalism, the Stalinists are the labor bureaucracy of the period of, quote, vast state capitalist trusts and syndicates, end quote. B. The Stalinists are not class collaborationists, fools, cowards, idiots, men with, quote, supple spines, end quote, but conscious, clear-sighted aspirants for world power. The Stalinists are deadly enemies of private property capitalism. The Stalinists aim to seize the power and take the place of the bourgeoisie. When the Stalinists support a war or do not support the bourgeoisie or do not support, they know exactly what they are doing. The bourgeoisie also knows. In fact, everybody, including most workers, knows this, except orthodox Trotskyism. C. But the Stalinists are not proletarian revolutionists. The Stalinists aim to get power by help, direct or indirect, of the Red Army and the protection of Russia and the Russian state. That is the reason why the Stalinists follow the foreign policy of the Kremlin. It is sheer naked self-interest. D. The Stalinists, the Stalinists, is a last desperate attempt under the guise of, quote, socialism, end quote, and, quote, planned economy, end quote, to reorganize the means of production without releasing the proletariat from wage slavery. Historical viability, the Stalinists have none. For state ownership multiplies every contradiction of capitalism. Antagonisms of an intensity and scope so far unknown already have Stalinism in their grip. Power merely brings these into the open. The dilemma of the Fourth International is that it has to recognize that there now exists a labor bureaucracy which is the enemy of private property and national defense, and yet is counter-revolutionary. The Fourth International cannot escape this decision. If the destruction of private property and the repudiation of national defense are revolutionary, then Stalinism is revolutionary and there is no historical need for a Fourth International. F. These are the questions which the theory of state capitalism deals. The theory is not primarily concerned with defensism or defeatism in Russia, about which we can do little. We are primarily concerned here with what the refusal to accept this theory does to the party's solidarity, the party's capacity to fight its enemies, the party's capacity to preserve itself and grow, in brief, to prepare the liquidation of Stalinism. That's the end of the section. What is Stalinism in State Capitalism and World Revolution by C.L.R. James, Raya Dunayevskaya, and Grace Lee Boggs. Thanks for listening.